as I began to learn that the establishment was not this pillar that I thought it was going to be, I rebelled against it. Already was like a hippie. Like I already didn't belong there. And the thing that was a big deal to me was that sort of the brainwashing that you get when you go through boot camp, so I thought at the time, really didn't take. So I still questioned everything and I knew it wasn't good.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast for military and veterans. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, and provide value and solutions to help make life more abundant. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is Kia Baker. She is the creator and host of Hot Topics Live, a live stream interview series, the Female Veterans Podcast. The goal of the podcast is to give female veterans a platform to share their real stories, good or bad, while changing the prevailing perception that veterans are only men. After serving in the U.S. Navy, she spent 20 years helping other veterans make the transition from active duty to civilian life. Her passion for empowering women and veterans inspired her to broaden her reach by connecting with organizations that advocate for female veterans. Her mission is to shine a light on female veteran stories, help female veterans thrive in life, and advocate for alternative therapies for sick and suffering veterans. Kia holds an MBA in Finance and Accounting and is also an alumni of the Milton Hershey School. She also works closely with the Passageways Ltd., a foundation that helps homeless veterans transition back to thriving in life. ERIS, an organization that empowers women to exceed their own expectations, and the Barbara Giordano Foundation, volunteering to give transformational workshops to female veterans. In addition, she is a member of the board for Hope for Veterans, a nonprofit that helps female veterans residing in Florida through peer support. Kia is a graduate from the London Real Academy and now coaches rapid transformation accelerators for the Academy. Kia, thank you so much for being on the show today.
So it is my pleasure, and I'm so honored to have been invited. So my birth name is Zakia, and most people call me Kia. I usually say Kia like the car, and it's just how I've always been known since I've joined the military. So it's been who I've become, and um, most of the people that call me Zakia are in my private school, Milton Hershey School in Hershey, PA. And I left from there to go into the military. So that's kind of where my military story began, actually.
So, Kia, I would love it if you spend so much time hearing other people's stories on your podcast and serving other people. I would love it if you would take a minute to share part of your story with us today.
I'd be happy to. And you're right. I hear so many stories. My podcast turned 3 years old this year. And thank you,
Congratulations.
on July 8th. And I've been sort of celebrating by taking some time off and slowing down a little bit. But I do hear a lot of stories, and I believe it's the stories that connect us. And I'm so honored. I never really share my story. So just little bits and pieces through conversation with my guests. And in an upcoming book, I'll be sharing a little bit more about my story. But I'm happy to be here and share it with you today. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. And, you're right. We, especially in the podcasting community, we spend so much time hearing other people talk about their stories and maybe sharing snippets of our own. But I think we often forget how powerful it is to share our entire story. And so I'm going to hand the mic off to you, and I'm super excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, like I said in the beginning, my military story began actually in high school. It was my sophomore year, and all of the other students at my private school were looking at colleges and preparing to take the SATs and um, moving in that direction. And because I came from a impoverished family, a single parent home, where a lot of students did that went to my school actually. Um, but for me, my mom was unaware of how the whole college thing worked. She'd never had a a child who went to college. I am number three of four, and the older two are 7 and 8 years older than me. And at the time, my sister, I don't believe she had started college yet, but she did. She eventually went on to get her master's degree. But at the time, my mom did not know much about that. She attended Temple University a little bit when she was pregnant with me, but she didn't really have a full college education. So when it was time for me to seek, guidance from my mom about college, and it was time for me to start looking at colleges and thinking about those things, she said to me, "Well, how do you think we're going to pay for that?" She said, "And anyway, you're not going to college. You're going to the military." And I said, "I'm going to what?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "Yeah, you're going to go to the military." And growing up in the type of household, you did what you were told to do. And I didn't want to go to the military, but I happened to see that they had this thing called the Montgomery GI Bill. It was relatively new at the time. And I thought, that's how I'm going to go to college, because my dream was to go and have that experience on a little campus with the old buildings and a huge library, and go to lectures and just have this experience. I wanted that experience living in the dorm and all of that. And I thought, I've got to get it for myself, but I have to also obey my mother. And she wants me to go to the military. And like, she wasn't like cold about it, really. She was like, "This is going to set you up. I'm helping you. Like, you need to go and spend some time in the military because it's going to give you a firm foundation to start your life." And I had an aunt who did 20 years in the army. She got to see the world, she had great experiences. And my mom's dream had been to go to the army, but she had her kids young. And after me, she spent some time waiting for me to get old enough, going through some problems she had, splitting up with my dad. Then she started getting herself in shape and getting herself prepared to go into the army. But she was at the last age, I think she was 36, the last age allowable to go in. And then I remember us going to stay with our grandfather. He was going to be our guardian while she was gone through training and everything. And then one day she just showed up out of nowhere and said she wasn't going. And then I discovered I was going to have a little brother. So she missed her window to be able to go. So I felt a certain sort of responsibility in a way to allow her to live through me by going. And then, of course, I saw my way to go to college. So I thought, okay, I can do this. And you know what? I don't have to worry about all the things everybody else is worried about. I'll just take the ASVAB. And I started talking to the military guys whenever career day would come up and learning as much as I could. And then my junior year, I took the ASVAB and everybody else was taking the SATs. And I scored really, really well. And they said, "Well, you could pretty much have any job you want. You just need to pick which branch you want to go into." And I said, "Okay." I was 17. And I went to see, and my mom was like insisting upon the army. And I was like, no. I mean, I was a teenager, so I had to rebel in some way, right? So I was like, no, I'm not going to the army. I will do this military thing. I will do it for the minimum required time, and I will pick my own branch. And my mom sort of was like, okay, fine, I respect it. She sort of let me have that. And I remember I narrowed it down by talking to the recruiters that would come to career days to be the Air Force or the Navy. And I was like, that's it. Air Force or Navy. I want easier. I want easier. So I said, okay, let's see. I went to see the Navy recruiter. I went to see them both in the same week, like a day apart. I went to see the Navy recruiter, and when I walked in, was like this kind of chubby guy sitting behind a desk with his feet up. and he looked like shit. I was just like, was this guy partying all night? Like, what is going on? And he was just like leaned back in the chair, and he was like, I forgot my presentation. And I was like, what? And he was like, I had a presentation for you, but I forgot about it. So I like forgot to bring it. So you can just ask me anything you want to know about being in the military, and I'll tell you. We'll just talk. And I was like, okay. So I sat down, and I was like, do you get to see the world? Do you get to have fun? Because remember, I'm a private school girl. So I'm like, I mean, it wasn't as strict as some, but it was strict enough for me to be like, I want to spread my wings a little bit. Like, can I get some freedom? Like, I know it's the military, but do you get to have any fun? You know? And he was like, what? Oh, yes, you get to have a lot of fun, maybe too much fun. And I was like, really? And he said, oh, yeah. And I got a chance to take my mom to Africa, and I went all around the world a few times. And, I made some of the best friendships I ever made. And he was like, you always get liberty. So you get to go out when you don't have duty. You get to go out, you go have fun. And it's sort of like you're a civilian sometimes, but you have to respect the uniform at all times. And I said, oh, okay. And so we talked for about 2 hours, actually, had a great conversation. I said, okay, thank you. And I left. And I was like, man, there's no way in hell I'm joining the Navy. That guy's a mess. It sounds fun, but that guy was a mess. So the next day I went to see the Air Force recruiter. And when I tell you this man was pristine, he was pristine head to toe. That uniform was impeccable. And he had this slideshow presentation, and he went through every point, and I sat there, and it was like a lecture. And I was just like, wow, this guy is really organized. He was, really well put together. He's really, really impressive. And at the end of it, he was like, ask me questions. And I was like, this was really informative. Thank you so much. Do I get to pick my job? Was my question. And he said, it depends on what the needs are of the Air Force. And I said, okay, thank you. And then I left out of there, and I told my career counselor, I said, please inform the Navy that I would like to sign up. And they were like, really? I thought you said that guy was kind of a mess. And I was like, he was kind of a mess, but you know what? He was real, and it was more relaxed. And I want something like that. Like, I want to have fun. I want to see the world. I don't want to be so rigid, and also I want to pick my job. Like, I want to be able to choose what I do for the next, however many years of my life. And so when I met with him again, things were in motion. And he sort of was like, what do you like to do? And I said, they were trying to help me figure out what job to do. And I said, well, I work out a lot. I like to be healthy. And he said, oh, okay. So you like to watch what you eat and you like to work out. He said, that's like a dietitian. A dietitian works in the hospital corpsman.
Where that connection was made. Okay.
I don't even know, but it was like out of nowhere, like all the things that I could have been. He just was like hospital corpsman. So my mother was thrilled because when she was working, she worked in the hospital, and she was always, her dream for me was to be a nurse, which was not my dream at all. And so she was like, oh, this was like it for her. So you're going to go learn medical stuff. This is a win. This was a good choice. So she was happy with me joining the Navy. And I actually enlisted at 17 before high school was over. I went in on a delayed entry. And so I could finish high school, and then I did 6 additional months so that I could have sort of a break between high school and my new life, and just sort of take a moment. And I wanted to go in through the holidays. So I left for boot camp on November 19th, 1994. I went in before the holidays because I rightfully assessed that it would be an easier time to go through boot camp.
You were in Great Lakes, right?
I was in Great Lakes.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yep, I went through Great Lakes. I went in winter time, so like a crazy person, but we had a lot of time off because it was the holidays and everyone's in a good mood through the holidays. And RCCs, as we called them back then, were like pretty chill a lot. And was in a unique company. It was almost at the inception of the 900 company. So we were a hybrid company. I think I was like the third or fourth group through for that company type. And so our company wasn't, before that it was like a brother and sister company, but this was half guys, half girls. We were the company. And so the guys' barracks were just below ours, like in the same building and everything. And so it was a really different, unique experience. I mean, when we got mail and packages and stuff, we'd go into the courtyard and we'd all be together hanging out. And so we had a lot of these down moments where it was pretty chill. And it was a great experience. I really loved my CCs. I think the culture shock of boot camp, because I went by myself. I took a train. They didn't fly me from, I'm from Philadelphia. They didn't fly me from Philly to Chicago.
You took a
I
train
took a
from
train.
Philadelphia.
They sent me on the train. You know what? It was such a great experience. They got me a sleeper car. So I was in my own car alone with a bed and everything. And I just went across the country by rail. And it was so cool. I actually really love to do that to this day.
Wow, that's interesting. So I do have a question. So you said that that's the at the beginning of the hybrid. And when you say that, are you saying that that's right when they started to integrate male and female
Mhm.
divisions together in boot camp? So
Yes.
how was that experience for you?
I loved it. Oh, I didn't know any other way. You know, the companies before me we could see were all male, all female, most of them. And some of my girls I met in A school were in that kind of company. But mine, it was different. They were like our brothers. Like it was really, it was some of them dated through there. So you had crushes on some of them. You know how it was, you're teenagers. We were like
Yeah.
19, 18, some of us. But there was a few people that were a little older in our company, and that was cool. And I think those two ended up getting married for a while, but
Wow.
afterwards. But it was really cool. It was different because we had a male CC and a female CC. And I don't know, I liked them. They were really cool. Like I don't know of anything inappropriate happening between anybody while in my company, right?
Did you find that they treated you as an equal, as a female going through boot camp? Did you feel that you were on the same level as the males when it came to like just the rigor, the way that you're treated, everything boot camp?
Yes. With unequivocally, like everything was the same. Like,
That's
and
interesting.
we did drill marching. So we actually had extra rehearsal time drilling these show marches. And then we also, our company, we facilitated boot camp graduations. So we didn't do galley. We were a house crew. And so we took care of the house and we took care of the graduation drill hall. And so every graduation, this is my favorite part of boot camp, by the way. Every graduation, each and every week, we had jobs to do. And my job was to make Kool-Aid and hostess for the officers who participated in graduation. So I would be in a little room. There'd be cake and Kool-Aid. And my particular job was to make the Kool-Aid and then serve it, like for everyone. And it was such a chill job, right? Like,
Yeah.
and the officers were nice, and it's graduation, so everyone's in a good mood, right? And then after that was over, we'd have to clean up that room. And what would inevitably happen is there'd be a lot of cake and Kool-Aid left over, and they'd be like, okay, you guys have at it. Right. So we were eating cake and Kool-Aid every week. And it was cool. I mean, it was tough to adapt to boot camp. For example, when I arrived there, first of all, you have to understand I was sort of like a new age hippie in the 90s. Like my friends were like, you're going to the military, really? You're like the sweetest, most loving, like peace, love, happiness person we've ever met. Literally, like I was a reborn hippie. So I show up there with my little round suitcase with all my peace and love stickers on it. with everything they tell you that you can bring. Also, the hair requirement had just changed and you were allowed to wear braids. So I showed up with my braids. This is important to the story. I showed up with my braids and my little suitcase, and I showed up at the front gate, and I started to become aware that these were all old buildings, and you could see the Smurfs in their little blue Smurf sweatsuits marching with looks of terror on their faces. You could see all the levels of people marching around in the buildings and all the hustle that happens on the base. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I don't know what I've got myself into, but here we go. We're going to do it. And then my company wasn't ready yet. So they put me in a holding area, which was just like a barracks room. So I just sat on a bed till I got sleepy and fell asleep and just waiting. You know how it is. It's waiting, waiting, waiting. And then they're like, okay, your company's formed. My company commander came and got me. And then everything happened. Like everyone was formed. It's in the morning. It's like midnight. Like everyone's formed and we have to go start in processing through boot camp.
So there was no P days back then.
I don't
know what that is. Okay, so P days when, because I joined in 2015. So when I got there, obviously everyone flies in, so they come get you from the airport, and then they take you directly to RTC Great Lakes, and then from there you have your processing days or your P days. Yeah. And so you're not necessarily with, like, they haven't formed the divisions yet. Some people get there at different times, but everyone together at that night that you get there, you start going through that initial processing of getting your stuff, sending everything home. So it's interesting how
different
things have shifted. Different. Yeah.
I was like, what is what?
Yeah.
No, so we had P days. It was just as a formed company.
Gotcha.
So they had me wait there because my company was still, they were like, oh, so I remember hearing these things, but I didn't know what they meant, right? Oh, she's going 900. Oh, then have her wait here. And then I waited for hours, and then they finally was like, okay, your company's together. So we moved as a company, guys and girls, all in our civilian clothes, starting through the process, right? And in that process, I remember everything in our suitcase, no one kept anything. They were just like, the whole list of stuff they told you could keep to bring was like a moot point. They're like, all of that's going home. And you're like watching your stuff go, like, everything from home is gone. And I think for me, it hit me then that it was like, your whole life is about to start over. That's it. And interesting, one of the recruiters that drove me to the train station, because I had to go from where I enlisted about 2 hours north of where I was living by my private school. So they had to drive me from Philadelphia to Harrisburg to catch the train to go and to do, like, finish my MEP stuff and be ready. And he said on the way, interestingly enough, he was like, all the friends you think you have, you're not going to have them anymore. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, those friends you had in high school, nah. He's like, but you're going to make all new friends. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is so crazy. But it was true. It actually was true. I mean, and back when I was going through, I mean, email was not out yet. Right? Like, we had no cell phones. We didn't even have pagers yet when I went into boot camp. Like, doctors had pagers, but it wasn't the main thing. I mean, I did have a pager at one point. And then, I was all a part of that technology evolution that has happened, right? But when I was in, it was a lot harder to, like, maintain connections with people because you just had phones, like pay phones and all of that.
They still use the pay phones
at boot camp.
As far I mean, I don't know, maybe I can't speak for now, but when I went, we still use the pay phones. Yep.
So, I mean, boot camp was interesting in that regard. And I think the story that I usually tell of what gelled things for me is with the girls is, so I think there must have been 100 of us or 99 in our company. And it was, I think, around 40 something, 50 girls. And so when we went through, we got to where the guys were getting their haircuts and the girls were getting their haircuts. And so my company commander said to me, She said, "Your hair is unsat." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Those got to go." And I said, "What?" Like, I was just like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, you've got an hour to get those out, or we're going to have to shave your head." And I was like, "But there was no buts." Okay, the regulation did not extend to boot camp. It was for everybody else. So even though my recruiters, they didn't meant no harm, they were telling me the current information, but it was not the current information for boot camp. So every girl came up to me and helped me take my braids down. And it was such a incredibly like emotional moment for me, but it was also not lost on me that I didn't know any of them. But every single girl there understood the feeling that I was feeling, like the threat of getting your hair shaved off, and they stepped up and it bonded us like immediately. So, and I think even the guys kind of understood because they were just like, shell shocked watching me get my hair taken down out of these braids. And then one of the girls actually braided my hair up for me. She would always braid my hair anyways, because it was all natural back then. So, and very big curls, so unruly. And so she helped me get it under control. So I didn't have to get my hair cut off. And that was kind of a big thing. Like we did a lot of trades for each other too. Like I was really good at shining boots. So I shined probably everybody's boots. And then another girl would iron like all the uniforms. And then another girl. So we did a lot of trades as well. But I loved boot camp actually. It was hard. The physical part was hard, jumping off the high dive into that was pretty hard, but you did it, and it was easy because we didn't shoot weapons. So we did classes. We learned military history, which I loved learning, and all of this military etiquette and whatever else in all of these classes, which was surprising to me. I think my cousin said there's a lot of classes, and I was like, what? And when I got there, because I thought it was all going to be all physical training and, preparing for, like action, and, but it wasn't. It was a lot of education, which I love. So for me, boot camp went by quickly. We had a lot of time off because of the holidays. So we got beat a couple times, but I got dropped. I made a career out of disappearing. So I was like the ghost. Like they weren't even sure who I was when I graduated boot camp because I made an effort to not be noticed, to just stay invisible. They confuse me with another girl all the time, and it's exactly how I wanted it. Like I just wanted to just go through like a ghost. And I did, and I made some good girlfriends there, and we were devastated when we had to part ways. We all stood around hugging each other, crying, as we parted. But I just went across the street, like up the hill and across the street to a school at Great Lakes. And it was awesome. When I got to core school, it was a brand new barracks. It was super cute. My roommate was in boot camp with me, Jo Beth Hand. I love her to this day. I miss her. I wish I knew where she was. She was awesome. And another good friend of mine was we shared there was like a Jack and Jill bathroom. So we shared the bathroom and she was on the other side. And it was kind of a lot like being in college, right? Old buildings, a dorm. It was like the barracks. And just lots of people coming and going. I remember there were elevators. It was really nice, new barracks at the time. And the guys' barracks was kind of across. So they were a little bit further. And it was nice. A school was really cool. I loved one of my professors the best, I would say. He was like a professor for me. Um, but Petty Officer Arnold was everything. He made A school so fun and just was incredible. And actually, we were friends after I became staff. We hung out until he transferred. I remember him helping me improve my driving with my first car and stuff like that. Like it was like really cool. A lot of early bonding experiences for me um, when I was in A school. And I made these two really good girlfriends. And when it was time for A school to be done, we said, all right, we got to make our dream list, you know. We know that our base is the training base and we know it's the strictest base. So if we all choose to stay here, we're more likely to get to stay together if we want to stay together. Um, and two of us got Chicago. We got Great Lakes, and the other one got Camp Pendleton, which I think maybe she chose. She went to California, and we were like, "You're going to California?" But two of us stayed there, and we became staff. And I think that's when things kind of got interesting for me serving. Um, I will often say I had more fun serving in the military than anyone should have. I had a blast. Like when I tell you I had fun, I had so much fun until the day I didn't. And so, and it all started really with failing uniform inspection. Now, I said I always kept my uniform good, and I kept a really tight uniform. What happened was after the fiasco of the braids thing in boot camp, I started learning the regulations for women's hair very well. And so I got braids again. And I went into uniform inspection, and this woman who was inspecting me failed me because of my hair. And because of that, I had to go to with all the people who failed uniform inspection to muster and get yelled at and get in trouble. However, I challenged it and I won. And she was very upset, by the way, when I challenged it, because as a Black woman, you don't understand my hair because you're not Black. So you don't know the you think you know the regulations, but you don't know them. And I made them get out the ruler and measure my braids. And I won that, but not before I had to go muster. So in this muster, with a bunch of people that I actually became really good friends with, there was this one kid who had dyed his hair blonde. It was like normally a strawberry blonde colored hair guy. He dyed his hair yellow blonde, like golden blonde. And so the chief didn't like it. And so they really went in. Like that's why he failed, because he dyed his hair. And they really went in on him. I mean, and this one particular chief was like tearing him apart. And he was like me, but in front of everyone, challenging the regulation, but in front of everyone while we're all mustered at attention. And he made an enemy of the command that day. And so I didn't really know that kid, but I saw what he was doing, and we all felt for him. Like we stood there. We had to, stand there and see it all, and we felt for him. A couple of months later, he started dating my roommate. She had a crush on him. He worked at the gym, the triplex, and I insisted that she ask him out and stop just talking to me about him because I was over it. And I was like, if you don't ask him out, I'm going to ask him out for you. Because I was a woman of the 90s, right? We did that kind of stuff. So
Oh yeah.
we do. We did everything. We ran the world back then. So she said, she finally went out with him, and they didn't work out, but we became friends, and we became friends for like 30 years. And along that way of our friendship, he started going out to these parties in Chicago, just like underground house parties. And I had this boyfriend at the time, and he was like, nah, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go to those parties, and I was like, underage, but I wanted to dance. And I was too young to go to clubs. And then my boyfriend that I had for like a year deployed, and I was bored and lonely, right? My friend was like, come with me, it's Halloween, come with me to this party. So I went with him to the party, and it was so fun. So then it became kind of a thing. And it was a kind of counterculture, subculture of these underground parties, right? It was like you got a flyer. The flyer had a number on it. You didn't know where you were going till midnight the night of the party. It was like exciting. It was fun. And we'd started going like every weekend. Um and we just had a lot of fun, you know. It was like a whole culture. So there was like a style of dress, what you wore, what you did, the type of music, the style of dancing. And when we really got into it, we formed sort of like a dance crew. And we would go like have like these the friendliest dance battles of all time with these people. And we would go and just dance with people or have dance battles, and everybody'd be in a circle. There'd be break dancers there. It was like really fun, lots of lights, lots of music, and all over the city, all over Chicago. But at the same time, by day we're in uniform. So the thing about those parties is there were a lot of drugs there. Not to say that we were using them, but they were there, right? And the fortunate thing about us being there is that we were older, right? A lot of these kids were still in high school, and they were getting themselves involved in things and getting themselves into trouble. Now, as hospital corpsmen, we're trained. We also have taken an oath to assist. So we assisted. And I am quite sure that because we were there are a lot of people who are alive today. And so I loved going. I have a lot of stories about that. But that the impact that doing that had on my military career is another story. So we met a lot of people. There were a lot of seedy people, even on the base. And about a year and a half into my time serving, they started drug testing. And there had been no drug tests before that, by the way.
Really? So that
None.
was implemented in,
I want to
oh,
say that had to be like, they were supposed to be doing that, but they weren't doing it. There were no drug tests for the first year and a half. For me, I never had one for a year and a half of my service after boot camp. So maybe almost 2 years.
interesting.
Okay. So I was staff at Great Lakes, and all of a sudden they started doing these drug tests, and I was like, why are they suddenly, what is going on? So then I found out that there was a drug bust on the base. A huge cocaine operation had been taking place, all the way from the lowest ranking to the highest ranking. And it was huge. And so a lot of people ended up in the brig, right? And I was really idealistic, really naive going from private school. I mean, I was the kind of girl who thought good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. If you just, do the right thing, nothing will bad can happen to you, right? Like the people in charge would never take advantage of the people below them. If you're serving in the United States military, then you've got to be a good person, right? And you also follow the UCMJ. Okay, you listen. Like that is the kind I was so naive. So as time went on, and I'm watching things happen and what happens to people and hearing the rumors, because a base is like a high school, right? It's a small place. So you hear about what's happening here and there and everywhere. And let's just say the naivete started to come off, come off, come off. And some of my friends that I met along the way were maybe not on the up and up, right? They came into the military. Um, they might have been in that underground culture before they came in. They found their way back to it, but maybe they weren't there to dance. Maybe they were there selling drugs or whatever else they were doing. Um, and I knew some of these people, and I knew what they were doing. Um, but I'm not a sellout, so I didn't sell them out, right? Like that's their business. I don't have anything to do with it. Don't ask, don't tell, right? So that's kind of how the whole energy of my time serving was like, don't ask, don't tell about anything, right? And I was doing my thing. Surely I knew the military would not like me to be in an environment like that, like a rave environment, but it was fun. And it was how I was coping with the pressure of being in the military at that time. And I will say it was peacetime. So I didn't deploy anywhere. I probably wouldn't have because I ultimately ended up being like a pharmacist. I worked in the pharmacy. Um, but there were different stressors because when there's nothing going on, and even actually, there's a lot of shenanigans when you deploy. We all know that. I mean, but there's also a lot of shenanigans during peacetime. They just can be different. And so I was having a coming of age as a black woman in the mid 90s in the military. And I was sort of rebelling against as I began to learn that the establishment was not this pillar that I thought it was going to be. I rebelled against it. Already was like a hippie. Like I already didn't belong there. The thing that was a big deal to me was that sort of the brainwashing that you get when you go through boot camp, so I thought at the time, really didn't take. So I still questioned everything and I knew it wasn't good. And I'd also kind of made a little name for myself because I challenged that woman. So then they were like, oh, she's a little bit of a problem. And then I challenged other things. Like there was a really racist chief. I called it out, you know. Or my friend, before we really became good friends, he got into some trouble. This kid accused him of stealing SIQ chits and giving them to him. Because the kid, I don't know where the kid got them from, but he had a stamp for a provider that was not from our clinic, right? It was from 1017 or somewhere on recruit training side. So I don't know where he got this book, but I guess this kid was going SIQ all the time. Like he was just missing work. And so whenever he would turn back up, he was like AWOL. But whenever he would turn, I knew the guy, but I wasn't like super, super close with him. I liked his wife. She was really cool. But he was kind of a seedier kind of guy. And he turned up with these chits. And he said that my friend gave them to him. And I knew the guy, right? I knew him well because I was good friends with his wife. But I knew him well enough to come visit me while I was on duty, let's just say. And I remember a time that he popped in with another friend of mine who actually did work at the other clinics, right? And they came by and visited me while I was on duty. And I was like, yeah, you guys can't really stay because they come by and check on me and come check while I'm on duty. So you can only stay here for like a minute. What are you guys up to? Blah, blah, blah. We had a chat. I'm like, okay, they're going to come soon. So you guys got to split. I can't have you here. Like, you know, thanks for coming through, but I'm on duty. Right. So I told them, go out the back. The back door is unlocked and just head out the back because the guy's going to come in probably through the front way. Right. So I said, take off. And they did. They took off. Guy came through, did all the checks. Everything was cool. Everything's fine. So flash forward to suddenly my friend's in a lot of trouble. And he's like, I have to go in front of a court, you know. They're saying that I did this and there's going to be a trial and it's kind of a big deal. And I was like, I should say something because those guys, I don't know that they got them from my clinic, but they could have. And all of my friends were like, don't say anything, Kia, stay out of it. Like, stay out of it. And I was like, I know this guy. I mean, I didn't know him super well at the time. We got cooler after that. But I was kind of like, I gotta say something. It's the right thing to do. Like, if that guy, I don't think the guy took those from my clinic, but if he did, it happened while I was on duty. I was on watch, and this guy didn't give them to him, right? So there's a chance that that's the case. And so I spoke up and I testified for him. Actually, I was the key witness in that case, and he got off. The other guy, interestingly enough, got out. They let him out. So there's something going on there, right? Backing that up to, this is the same kid who was challenging the regulations during uniform inspection. At that point, I witnessed my command, maybe not at the highest levels, but at lower to mid levels, target him and persecute him in every way possible. And just made his life a hell. And I did this for him, and it didn't stop. It got worse. I mean, there was even a second trial about something else that I actually was there again and was a witness for him, and he ended up getting off again. But eventually they administratively discharged him out of the military because they just kept trying to pin things on him, and he wasn't doing it. He wasn't doing that.
So
Like,
what rank were you at this time?
so I was at probably at E2. Like,
Really?
mm-hmm. Yeah. I made E4 just before I was getting out.
Wow.
Like, I took the test like probably a month before I was gonna get out, and made it as I was getting out. I'm like,
So what was the rank structure, I guess, to get from E1 to E2 to E3 to E4? It wasn't just an automatic
well,
bump
the
up.
first ones are like, I think up to E2, yeah. And then you have to start passing more qualifications. You have to get all of these things. You have to do so many hours of education.
Really?
Yeah, you had to do all of this stuff. You had to get like signed off by a supervisor. And there was a lot of stuff. And then you had to pass the test.
Really? See,
So there was,
I don't understand where the Navy got away from that, because now we have this push button from E1 for, I don't even know if this is Navy wide, but for a lot of people, even though all the way up to E4, I don't think there's a test anymore. Yeah.
how many times I had to take that test?
Yeah. Yeah, it's insane. I know for a couple rates, I don't think, and don't quote me on this because this changed as I was getting out. I think it started with COVID, and then I think they just kind of made it a permanent thing, but I don't think they're making E4 or people take tests to get from E3 to E4 anymore. So, but the reason that I ask you about the rank thing is because I think that in the 90s, like I was very young in the 90s, but I still remember being a woman of color in the 90s. It's hard enough as it is because
Mm-hmm.
we're still in this time. People were not as accepting in the 90s as they are
Mm-mm.
today. It's a whole different world today. But then on top of that, being a woman in the military, on top of being a woman of color in the 90s, there's so much working against you, but you
So
were
much.
so empowered to stand up not only for yourself, but for everyone else around you. Like, that is so incredible to me. And I'm
Thank you.
legitimately curious, like where you found that strength inside you to be able to do that in an organization that quite literally could have like ruined every part of your career if they really wanted to.
Well, I haven't got to that part of the story yet. But um part of that is just, I have always lived by a certain moral code. Like, I don't know why, it's just always been who I am. And it's probably why I believed good things happen to good people if you just do the right thing. I grew up in different religions, but my favorite one, while I'm more spiritual now, but when I was still very religious, I loved being like a non-denominational Christian. It was like my favorite. I loved everything about that. It was so fun, and fun. And in boarding school, my house parents, because it was like a family style school, it wasn't like you see on TV. We had these people that simulated parents, right? And in middle school, I had these house parents, shout out to the Grossenbachers. They were incredible. And they really instilled in me a really strong sense of doing the right thing, even if it's difficult, right? And I try to still be like that. And I try to, because the world doesn't make that easy. It makes it actually hard most of the time.
Absolutely.
And so, I try to put that in my kids too. So I had that sort of right and wrong background. I had a really strong sense of ethics and morals for my to hold myself to. I've always been sort of really into social justice, and I'm not huge into astrology, but I'm Libra by birth, and they say that this is the scales of justice. So some of those things seem to apply. They ring true to me, and I have always wanted to be the person that balanced the scales to make sure everything was fair. And I was seeing injustice. That is what made me anti-establishment. For years I didn't vote. I didn't have anything to do with politics or anything because I was just like, this is all bullshit. This every single bit of this is bullshit. If they order me to go shoot up a village, I have to go do it without question in the military, right or wrong. Don't get on a fucking high horse with me. You know what I mean? And not question it. And that's the kind of thing that I would always think about. Like, if I was ordered to do something like that, could I do it? Would I be a conscientious objector? And so another interesting thing happened when I was serving as well, because this is pre 9/11. Okay. So, 2 years before 9/11 happened, we went on threat condition alpha on our base because we're the only naval training base. So we're a high target facility. I was aware of weird shit like about to happen. I didn't know what it was. So there's no way you can never convince me that nothing was known about anything because I was there, period. Like I'll say it to you because you're military. I don't say that to a lot of people, but no. Second of all, I remember coming out of being told everyone has to attend these meetings. So on the base, I don't know if it's still there, but there was Ross Auditorium, which was the movie theater on the base. All of us went in shifts, the entire base went in shifts to go see this propaganda film about the anthrax vaccine. Okay? Because we were all going to get it. We went to two. Now, that going back to what I said about being a conscientious objector, that was when I was like, I gotta object to this. I'm gonna have to be a conscientious. I don't want that in my body. And I just felt it in every fiber of my being. Like, I get immunizations all the time. I don't know what the hell they're putting into me half the time. Like, they tell me it could be anything. It could be anything. We know they did experiments in the 60s and whatnot. Like, it could be anything. I definitely don't want that, especially because by that time I was battling health issues. So the biggest part of my story, aside of watching someone I really cared about be persecuted by people who should have been supporting and guiding his career, right? For nothing, just targeting him because he wasn't liked. And we are all very aware of the favoritism that takes place in the military. I'm not saying I wasn't privileged to it. I was, but I was also on the other end of not receiving it. So I guess it shifts, or there's cycles of it. But this kid was vilified and hated and targeted. So that was pretty traumatic to watch for me. But at the same time, I started getting sick. It started with mononucleosis. One day I just had mono, and I was sick for about 3 months. And I got better. And if you know anything about mononucleosis, they call it the kissing disease, but also it makes you extremely tired and weak and body aches and flu-like symptoms. And it lasts for anywhere a month to maybe 3 months. And that happened. And then I got better. And then I got it again. You're not supposed to get that more than once. So I got it again. And then at that time, I was working in the pharmacy. And because of I left the clinic that I worked in medical records at a job that I loved. I left medical records because of the racist chief. Right? Like essentially. And then he moved me. Everyone knew that I didn't want to do triage. I didn't want to see patients. I had no desire to be like a PA or anything like that. I didn't want to touch people in that way. I loved working in medical records. I was very happy there. He moved me out of there intentionally to see patients, which I did for about 3 months. And I did it because I had to. And I didn't want to, but I had to. So I did what I had to do. But I also was thinking, okay, I'm going to go to C school. What do I want to do next in my career? And um, maybe I want to check out the pharmacy. And then there was this girl, Sally Cheek, shout out Sally, who we're still keeping in touch on Facebook. She wanted to leave the pharmacy. And I wanted to go into the pharmacy, maybe OJT, and see if I like the pharmacy and if I wanted to do that. And so she and I were talking, unbeknownst to everybody, like, hey, I think there's this plan where we can do a switch. I can come because she wanted to be an EMT. So it was going to work out perfect. So she and I worked together, and then we went up our chain of commands and insisted that they let us do this because it was allowable. Like we found it, we proved it, it was allowable. And they allowed us to do it. So I was able to go into the pharmacy. But because of my reputation, I had helped a guy that everyone hated. It was well known because of the guy who with the SIQ chits was a guy who was also a drug dealer at these underground parties. Okay. Because of that, and I knew him and my friend, I had a and everyone knew me. And not to mention, most of the people that didn't go to those parties with us would have liked to have gone and knew that I was going by that time. And so I was well known on the base. So, and my friend went, like, everyone loved me. Everyone loved my friend. We were sort of like these unsung heroes that were fighting against the man in a way. That's kind of how it was. But now the powers that be, a lot of them were kind of like, get them. So it was, and I was always fighting for something. And this is something else I was fighting for, like to get out of that situation where I was unhappy and go check out the pharmacy. Now, Sally was known as the darling of the pharmacy. They absolutely loved her and were devastated that she was going to leave. Like she was this angel. And but she wanted to be a wild girl. Sorry, Sally. We both know it's true. And I was known as this wild girl who was trying to go into the pharmacy, and they hated it. So I had an uphill battle moving into the pharmacy to prove myself to them in the first place that I was not a drug addict. I was not going to be stealing meds. And second of all, that I love the job. I do the job. And I absolutely, to this day, love the pharmacy, was passionate about the work that I did there, loved everybody that I worked with, all of them. If you were there during that time with me, you know that. And I absolutely had the best commander, the best officers, the best experience. It was like a family. I was in the best shape of my life because my commander was an avid runner and he encouraged us to take an hour and a half lunches to work out. Like it was such a great experience. But when I first got there, I really had to like show them me, like let them know me, get a chance to know me and see that I was not this girl that my reputation was saying that I was. So that's kind of what was difficult for me. And it was also this thing with my roommate. There's a whole sexual harassment thing, and she ended up trying to kill herself. And I had been a loud advocate for trying to remove her from the clinic, from where she was being, harassed. And so I was kind of known as a troublemaker, like sort of a loudmouth, and not to mention I was going to all these parties underground, that was becoming, it was very secretive for probably like a year and a half. But then that rave culture became mainstream. Like it started to be reported in the news. And then it became a big deal. So then I started getting drug tested every surprise. Those were air quotes because you can't see them. But like every surprise urinalysis, my name came up. And my friend had then, he was about to get out of the military. And I was actually really good friends with the admiral's daughter on the base. Like she was so amazing. And she had her and her best friend, they used to come and hang out at my apartment. And we would hang out together and do stuff together sometimes. She was really cool. And this one particular day, I was complaining about being harassed by this guy who had been following me around and asking me all these weird questions about drugs and how he could get them. And I worked in the pharmacy. I didn't know. I was like, just anything to get this guy to leave me alone. And she said that he sounded familiar and that she thought that he was this guy that had been in the brig. And lo and behold, um, shortly after that, she said, don't talk to him, and you should probably complain to someone about him if you're starting to feel harassed. Like he was calling me at work. He was like showing up at my job. And I had like from one day to the next, like one day he showed up at the pharmacy window and was like, hey, I just talked to your friend Pete. And he said, I should come talk to you about what's the next hottest party to go to. And I was like, who are you? Like, and so I was like, oh, but I was always like very inclusive and very kind to everybody. So I said, yeah, I'll tell you like I'll tell you when a good party's coming up. Nope, no problem. Like if it sounds cool, good DJs, good lineup, I'll tell you about it. And then it just went from there and it became really, really harassing for like a month. So one day I just said to him, listen, so one of my roommates in my apartment off base, she was a civilian and she had this girlfriend who lived off base with another friend of mine. And she said, oh, this is what we're going to do. Tell him to call this number and she'll lose him for you. Like, just tell him, oh, yeah, I know somebody, call this number. And then this girl will take the call and she'll get rid of him for you. And then when he comes back to you, be like, sorry, dude, that's the only, this is like a weak plan, but this is the best we could come up with, right? So instead of just like, the person I am now would have been like, fuck off. Like, just get the fuck out of here, right? The person I was back then was just like so sweet. I didn't want to hurt his feelings.
But you're still very young at this time, right?
I was really young. I was like 22, 21, something like that. So, so I did. That's what we did. He called me up one day. He said that. I said, call this number. Maybe they can help you. That's literally what I said. Maybe they can help you. And he was like, okay. And there is this one point. Oh, there was another time that I was going on a trip and he was like offered to give me money. And I was like, dude, you can give me money if you want, but like, I can't make you any promises that I can help you with any of this stuff. I was going to San Francisco. I was just always trying to get rid of him. Like, I'm like, I don't have a lot of money for this trip. If you want to give me some money, sure, I'll take your money. Like, but it was like almost in joking. So flash forward to NCIS taking me to be interrogated and playing back to me my conversations with him. And that, my friend, is a very interesting experience to hear yourself having conversations from weeks and weeks before.
So it wasn't like an operation to try to pin something on you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah.
What they really wanted was my friend. Because the guy kept saying to me, hey, can you get your buddy John to hook me up with like a sheet of acid? Or can you get him to hook me up with some cocaine? And I'm like, what? No. Like, first of all, no, because he can't do those things, right? Like, but he kept saying stuff like that. And it was like to the point where, and then it became, do you know anybody? Do you know? And it was so intense. So that when my friend that was the admiral's daughter said, I think he might have come out of the brig, it occurred to me that maybe he was out of the brig and he had to get people. And maybe they cut him some sort of deal, like you get us 5 people or 20 people or however many, you can go free. Because it was interesting that people that I had known that had gone to the brig had gotten out, but they got out of the military. So some people didn't, but some people did. And so it was just an interesting odd time. And I actually asked them, what they thought I did, and when they told me, I laughed. It's ridiculous. And I think laughing saved me. It was so stupid, like ridiculous, that I thought, "Oh my God, you're kidding. This is a joke." And they're like, "Well, tell us why you go to these underground parties." That's how serious it got with the whole raving scene in the mid 90s.
Wow.
And I was like, because I like dancing. Probably if I had known dancing was a career option, I would have become a dancer. But it was never, that wasn't, the arts were not a big part of our private school at that time. It was more college prep and business focused. So it wasn't like creative focus. I probably would have been a choreographer or a dancer or something. It was like my passion. So I was there. I started going before I was old enough to get into a club. So it was cheaper. I didn't have to be dressed up like in slinky clothes. I could just be in jeans and a t-shirt and go dance for 8 straight hours, dance my heart out. I met all these cool people, and I helped a lot of people. Different scenarios that arose at these parties. Like it could be an assault and battery, it could be a domestic violence, between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, a couple of drug overdoses, some car accidents, like just to name a few things that we came across that we helped in those situations. And so I think it was really good for us to be there. We were older. People could never believe that we were in the military. They say, "What school do you go to?" We'd be like, "School? I'm in the Navy." They're like, "Oh my God, you look so young." It's like I was like 21. So
So
anyway,
what came out of the whole NCIS thing? Did they get anything out of that you know of, or if you're able to share?
I don't know. They let me go. I got to go. And it was so traumatic for me, that moment, that in retrospect, I didn't know it at the time, but in retrospect, it changed my entire life. Because suddenly I was in survival mode and I had to change or go to the brig. It was that. It was like no more parties. I got married. Like, now I did think I really loved my husband. But in retrospect, that was part of that. That was all. I changed everything. I didn't dress the same. I didn't hang out with the same people. I distanced myself from all my friends that I used to dance with. I got really serious in this relationship. I ended up getting married. I'm just changed completely. And I was able to finish my military career honorably. I got a letter of commendation from the command for extraordinary service during recruit surge, because in the summer, recruit surge and the pharmacy gets slammed. And we would often bring in other people. I actually met my best friend in life during a recruit surge. She came to help out in the pharmacy. We're still friends. We've lived our whole lives together since that time, and so I made it. It was like graduation day for me, like as if I graduated from college. My last day, they threw me a party. Like there were tears. It was the most amazing day, and I did it, and I got out honorably. I did my 5 years active, then I had my 3 years in active reserve, but I was essentially free. And the health issues continued. I had gotten mono several times while serving. There were other things that had happened while I was serving that I had to fight for myself after I got sick, because, I had duty and they decided to put me on gate guard. And I had during the night, because see, they didn't like me. So they put me on gate guard during the night shift. So I started at like midnight or 11 p.m., but I had mono. So knowing I had mono, and one day I missed duty because I just slept. Like it's uncontrollable. You might as well be narcoleptic. And I had to fight because I had mono, and like so I was always fighting something while I was in fighting for someone or fighting for myself while I was in the military. And it didn't make me beloved to some, but it did make me beloved to others. And so It was a good experience that I'm very proud of. It definitely shaped my view of the world and how I interact with people and of the government. And I saw a lot of bad things happen to good people while I was serving. Um, there was a rapist loose on the base for like 3 months. Some of those girls, I saw how domestic violence was treated poorly. It should have been handled better within the military system. Um, but I was fortunate enough to be on a base and in a job where there were a lot of women. Maybe not a ton of Black women, but there were a lot of women, and there were a handful of us Black women too, actually, where I had my very first Black girlfriends, actually. And so it was an extraordinary experience. I wouldn't change one thing about it because it made me who I am. There were definitely terrifying moments. I got PTSD. I'm a disabled vet because of the things that happened, like the illnesses and then what those illnesses caused. It's still a mystery to me why I even got it to begin with and what this is. But I made a lot of really amazing friends, a lot of whom I'm still in touch with to this day. And um and now I get to share female veteran stories. And it inspired me because when I got out of the military, I thought I was going to have such an easy, like amazing life. Like I'm out. There's nothing that's going to be as hard as that. And, I didn't fit in because I wasn't all gung ho and all of this. And then I got out. And within 3 years of being out, I was left penniless by my husband, about to be homeless, and I had been laid off by my job. I was so good at picking the worst corporate jobs to work at because I decided I'm not going to pharmacy school. I've been doing that for 3 years. Why am I going to spend an entire education to go to pharmacy school and become a pharmacist when I've been doing that? So I still think that it's pretty shitty of the government not to have a national certification for people who served in the military and have been military trained. I still have get on my soapbox about the training. We're trained by the United States government. Why does not that not translate into the civilian world? This is disrespectful. But everybody wants to say, oh, we care about veterans when it comes to political fucking theater. But when it really matters, like the PACT Act and how hard they had to fight for that shit, these people are dying because of burn pits. But they want to ignore it. But oh my God, this person kneeled in front of the flag. The veterans are going to be in an uproar. Honey, I'm in an uproar because it took me 10 years to fight for my disability. That's why I'm in an uproar. Right. I should fucking kneel in front of the flag too. Okay? Right. For veterans' rights.
Yeah. But I think that's why podcasts like this podcast, like your podcast, I think it's so important because I think there's a disconnect between what the civilians think military and veteran lifestyles are like compared to what reality is. Mm-hmm. And until we close that gap by sharing stories, no one knows what veterans are outraged about. There's so many issues out there. PTSD, mental health, physical traumas, physical health, homelessness. You could name so many things that are real problems in the military and veteran communities. And people just don't know. They think that the military is this amazing place where there's free health care and you get taken care of so well. But let's be real, a lot of military, they get out after 5, 10, whatever years. A lot of people aren't doing 20 years. And you're just kind of thrown to the wolves. And, some people are lucky enough or privileged enough, I guess, to have access to that information about what's out there, because there's a lot of things out there. But a lot of times I find that the military keeps that information from a lot of people, and you kind of have to dig for resources on your own. And sometimes you get sick of digging for resources and it's so exhausting. And, you're so right. There's so many things. When you share your story, it just, one thing that stands out to me is that the military is always telling people you're a leader at every level. You're a leader from an E1 all the way up to, the highest rank. And I think that so many people have such a hard time stepping into that power. Do you think It's kind of a, I don't, not necessarily a controversial question, but do you think that powerful women should be in the military, or do you think that they're better served outside of the military?
I think powerful women belong everywhere. I think that we have been slept on too long and it's our time, especially Black women. Sorry, but I am one. And there was a long time period of my life where I thought it was the worst thing in the world to be just the bottom of the food chain, right? And all things, and God forbid you're a gay Black woman. But now I've realized through time that is the best thing to be, just even as a woman in general, and we have to take our power and we have to use it. But because we're women, we have the softness and the warmth and the ability to use it well, to use it with a balanced amount of logic and critical thinking and emotion and feeling, which means, I mean, we have we are the holy grail. We create life. We create life. You know what I mean? Like, we're the top of the food chain. Like, we created the food chain. Like, it's what it is. So I think women have to step into their power, have to become really strong in their self concept of who they believe they are in all the roles they hold in life, because we hold so many roles in life. And then we have to be unashamed and unafraid and not guilty about using it.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it so much. And, I think that we live in this incredible time right now, 2022, almost 2023, where all these women are stepping into their power. And we're
Mhm.
starting to see the shift in our culture where women are speaking up. Women are saying, enough is enough. My voice has been suppressed for too long. This is what I have to say. And I think it is so incredible to watch and see that transformation from even the 90s until
Yes.
now. It's not, I feel like the 90s and early 2000s were just a few years ago. And, when people tell
Me
me they
too.
were like 30 years ago, I'm like, oh.
Yeah. I know it's true. It's like when what I was bumping in my car is on the classic adult station. It's a rude awakening. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, what is happening here? I feel like it was yesterday. I cannot believe it's been nearly 30 years since I went into the military. But at the time, I will say in the 90s, it felt like we had made so much progress. It felt like we had made so much progress that we were starting to step up and stand in our power, and it was all about, the Spice Girls and girl power, and the messaging for women was to take action, take control. You can hold this job, you can break that glass ceiling. And that's, the mindset that we have. It can be detrimental if you forget your femininity because you're doing all of these really strong, powerful, super masculine things. So it takes a balance, I think, I find. But and now there are some, in some ways, that it's so much better, and there are some ways where our progress is stunted. But I think as long as I love the evolution of what I'm seeing, the acceptance of all kinds of people, being like non-binary and gender fluid and all of it, like, I think is beautiful. I love all of that. I think this is how it should be. We should be accepting. Representation matters of everything. And there are so many different kinds of people in the world, and we are all important and unique in our own way, and we should all be accepted. That's my new age hippie come like right in the forefront. I've always been that way. I've always been we're all connected. We're all one species. We are a family. We should accept and love and support each other and not be divided from one another. So to me, in some regards, we have a long way to go because of the divisiveness that you can still see in the world, and even the racism that still exists, and the sexism and homophobia. And that's one of the things I say on my podcast of why it was created. It's because I saw all those things in the military. that's when I became very aware of them, right? All that naivete just gone. So I didn't know anyone who didn't see or at least witness some sort of sexism, bullying, sexual harassment, homophobia, like any of that stuff, military sexual trauma. And I thought to myself when I was creating my podcast, because when I was low, people helped me. People taught me how to find the resources that I needed to help myself. So I started helping other people. And when came time to my podcast, I didn't realize that for 20 years, I had been helping people figure this stuff out. And I think it was the next evolution to say, well, all of these people in the military who saw or experienced the things that I witnessed or experienced have a story, especially the women. And so it's my platform to continue to help veterans. And this is one way, but by sharing their stories, good or bad, by the people who experienced it. Like, let's get the truth out there. So, like you say, the civilian world can see what we experience as women in the military.
And it's so needed. So needed. So I am so grateful for what you do on all your platforms. I know I said in your bio and your intro, you are not only doing your podcast, but you're involved in so many other things. And I truly believe just from hearing that you are in your power, if not adding on to that more and more every day. So Kia, thank you so much for taking the time to be here on the show today, share your incredible story. Can you just let the audience know where we can find you, where your podcast is at, and where we can find you in other avenues? And yeah, go ahead and share.
Absolutely. Well, I'm everywhere. So you can find me on Twitter at FemVet Podcast. You can find me on Instagram at the Female Veterans Podcast. You can go to my website, thefemaleveteranspodcast.com, and check me out there. You can send an email to me, and if you want to be on the show and share your story, if you want to connect with me in some way, if you'd like me to come and do, I actually, my main hustle is I do performance coaching through an online academy, right? So we do transformational coaching, and if you want me to come and do, I sometimes speak to groups of female veterans and share some of the things that I know about business or podcasting or just life and self-concept and loving yourself and all of that stuff. You can reach out to me through that, and you can always shoot me an email at zakiabaker@gmail.com if you want to reach me directly, and that's Z as in zebra, AKIA Baker. And I will get back to you as soon as I can, and we'll either get you booked on the show or I can see how I can support you.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to link all that in the show notes below for anyone that wants to reach out. And again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for just being here and sharing what life was like in the military in the 90s and the powerful things that you have done for everyone that has crossed your path. I would love to hear so much more, but for time's sake, we have to end the show.
Sure.
But thank you again.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Each week, I'll be bringing you value in the mental health space and its direct impact on service members and veterans. If you feel you personally got value today from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and share this to your audience. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.